Good morning, everyone. Brian here with BMK Retro Gaming. You guys know you wouldn't usually get a video from me on a Friday unless something were up, and there is. You see, I'm here this morning to welcome you guys to BMK Retro Gaming's RetroTober 2021. You see, I'm one of those people who kind of like Grandpa here happens to celebrate Halloween and also the throughout the season of October. To me, it's my favorite holiday season, and I keep it going all month. As such, BMK Retro Gaming is going to do this yearly as a holiday season special. Anyway, there's not really much point in doing all that without discussing a bit of the history of the season. The old history, probably goes back anywhere from ancient to prehistoric times before there was writing. So, it's not entirely well known. But of the traditions that are known that led up to our modern Halloween traditions, one which is a possible source is back in the ancient Roman holiday of Parentalia, which was where every February 13th, the male head of the household was to take various types of offerings and basically do a vigil in the burial grounds, the cemeteries outside of the main Roman Empire, which is where they ironically enough put them, in hopes of appeasing the spirits of their deceased relatives and ancestors, so that they hopefully would remain at peace and not decide to go wandering about and creating trouble. And again, it was a lawful duty by the male head of each household, so they really didn't have a choice. They had to do this. Still, government businesses and everything else were all closed down. It was observed as a holiday. Later on, in Gaelic and Irish traditions, we have Samhain, which is a more direct precursor to Halloween. People at the time would believed that it was mostly European, but there were a lot of similar traditions other places. Anyway, it'd be celebrated usually from the sunset on October 1st to sunrise on October 31st to sunrise on November 1st. Though sometimes for different periods. And, well, basically, it was a day. People figured that the time, just as the winter was about to come on, when their last crops that would be viable to be harvested before winter would be getting harvested, when the livestock were being brought back in preparation for the winter months, and when they were planning basically the crops that they would be using to survive. They would be planting the crops that would basically survive the winter and come up as their first spring crops too. Anyway, there were a lot of traditions here. Probably a precursor to our modern day trick-or-treating is that individuals, particularly children, would go around to different homes seeking to collect donations of wood for a communal bonfire. And also they would be collecting sweet treats and all, They'd basically be threatening mischief if they were not welcomed. This communal bonfire was kind of meant as a form of sympathetic magic to imitate the sunlight for each community and hopefully keep wandering supernatural entities and spirits of the deceased from being encouraged to come and be a pain in the neck. Let me see. There also were a lot of these besides just collecting for the bonfire, the sweet treats were sometimes offered, and oftentimes the those who were going around doing this they would be reciting things like how do you say they'd be saying prayers and singing songs appropriate to the season, stuff like that. They'd be kind of similar to carolers, but not entirely. And if they were welcome, they would not create mischief. If they weren't, they might. Wonder what type, but don't want to go too deep into that. Also, they oftentimes would wear some form of costume, mask, or disguise in hope of blending in with the supernatural and deceased spirits that may be out and about. And otherwise, you didn't wander too far from home. Oh, and with the communal bonfire thing, for the most part, each community's home's hearth fire supposedly was doused in advance, and then fire from the communal bonfires would be taken to relight them. Hopes of spreading the cleansing and protective powers they believed that the bonfires had. Also, one other thing that happened during this time, was it's also a time when a lot of times it was taken much more seriously than people have since, but divination, fortune telling, particularly using things like apples and I forget if it's acorns, walnuts, or what, but chestnuts, I think it might have been. Some type of nut. Anyway, they basically would be used in divination and fortune telling. People like to try to find out: am I going to get married? Am I going to die? What? Am I going to get wealthy? Some of it was all in good fun. Some wasn't. And another common tradition in the homes was that they would set a place at mealtime symbolically for their deceased relatives and ancestors' spirits to be welcomed with hospitality back into the home. So it was an interesting little deal with that anyway. Then we get over to the next portion of the traditions, which would be All Hallows Eve, which is part of darn, I'm trying to think of it. All Hallowtide, I think it was, yes. Which would basically be consisted of All Hallows Eve, October 31st, All Saints Day on November 1st, and I forget what the last one was, but there was one more on the November 2nd, so anyway, this was where the Christian traditions came in. Basically, mostly the same type of thing, including church bells ringing for the souls of the deceased, and also commonly those who would go about caroling and such, or visiting in a form of proto trick-or-treating would end up. Oftentimes, there would have been what are known as soul cakes, based as a type of treat to give to them. They were cakes that usually had the symbol of the cross baked into them. And of course, then we'd get up to our modern Halloween tradition, where the All Hallowtide traditions, including All Hallows Eve and Samhain, with not much influence left over from Parentalia, would be merged together you see over in Europe, commonly, turnips, rutabagas and such would be carved and have, oftentimes the face of like some type of hideous face, and a votive candle put in to make a lantern for those who were out doing the wandering. And that was our predecessor to our modern day. That it was the first form of a jack-o'-lantern. As over to the Americas, the tradition was spread through immigration. Well, pumpkins just so happen to be softer and easier to carve, not to mention more common here. So our version of a jack-o'-lantern here tends to be more in the form of a pumpkin. And then, how things got more commercialized and all, that happens to be that, about the 1930s, children would usually take Halloween as a time where they'd run around and they'd do a lot of mischief, and the trick-or-treat thing was similar to how it had been in the past. If they didn't get a treat of some type, they would end up creating a lot of mischief, which, believe me, they could be pretty darn destructive. There's some good documentaries on TV describing what it was like at first. And basically how we got our traditions, people would usually make regular baked goods, and all. A lot of times those were homemade to give them. It was only later on that the holiday became more commercialized with the candy companies jumping in. Beyond that, to help mitigate the more disastrous effects of the holiday season with children, someone came up with the idea, and it soon spread, to start hosting Halloween parties, thus giving them somewhere to focus their attention instead of being out causing mayhem. So basically that's, and then companies started to commercialize things with the haunted house attractions and stuff and all. And companies start doing costumes, and we get to our more modern and pretty much commercialized, not quite all about money, but seems like it, Halloween traditions. Anyway, so that's a brief history of the traditions that go into our modern day Halloween. Now, how does it all tie into retro gaming? Well, like I said, I do Halloween a lot like other people do Christmas. So BMK Retro Gaming will be doing RetroTober, and that means, as much as possible, it won't be perfect, but there will be games featured for each console in the lineup, which is already active, both in the original library and homebrew, as much as I can manage it, where we'll go ahead and have our game reviews themed that way. After all, retro gaming and video games in particular, with the horror genres and such, happen to get to a point wherein they have basically become a very big staple genre of everything. And they're perfectly appropriate for this year. So I wanted to take you guys over a little short history of Halloween traditions and everything that goes up into them, and introduce you guys to the BMK Retro Gaming's RetroTober. Hope you guys are ready for this, because it's going to be, it's going to be a wild ride in a way. Maybe not too much different from my usual game reviews and such, but at the same time, we're going to get a little bit darker and deeper here. Anyway, that's about all for this morning. You guys, if you enjoy my channel's content, please like, share, and subscribe. And please don't hesitate to leave any questions, comments, or suggestions in the comment section down below. You guys take care. Get set to have a wonderful October. And I will see you guys again in my next video.